Six Nations this weekend. Second game we've got on is Ireland up against Scotland. Ireland still in with a fighting chance. They need to get a win over Scotland to keep things alive as the final game plays out with France up against England. For Scotland, they can hand France the Six Nations if they go to Dublin and get a win, but it's been a tough place for them to go in recent times. But anyway, we'll go through the squads, the stats, predictions, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how this game may play out this Saturday. For Ireland, they are clearly taking the game pretty seriously because they have not made many changes to the team, which has been pretty successful thus far in their Six Nations campaign. Healy, Sheehan and Furlong are the same front row. There's been a lot of talk about what happened in the scrums last week from the Irish camp. They didn't give a heck of a lot of detail, but they said that they've worked on what they need to work on and kind of got some feedback from the officials as to some stuff that may not have been going their way in error. But I would certainly expect that Irish front row to back up after last week. I think what we saw last week was probably a bit of an anomaly, but we'll see. Tadhg, Beirne and Iain Henderson, the same second row. Remember, James Ryan had a heck of a concussion smash to his head last week, so we wish him a speedy recovery where he doesn't need to be rushed back into any game time soon, because obviously you've got to look at your long-term future, so hopefully he takes his time and gets 100% right before he comes back. Iain Henderson will have a chance. You know, didn't have his best game last week. Andy Farrell mentioned it in the press conference that he's not had a heck of a lot of game time and was probably not expecting to have to come on and play 79 minutes, so he'll be looking to back up better than he did last week. I'm sure he will, because we know he's a talented player. Doris, Flier and Conan is a changed back row, with Doris shifting to 6, Flier stable, and then Conan up from the bench into number 8, so that means Peter O'Mahony drops to the bench. Gibson-Park and Sexton's the same 19 combo, so kind of steady as she goes, and another indication that these guys are pretty desperate to go out and have a win. There's no foot being taken off any throat here. Aki, Ringrose, same midfield. Lowe and Hansen are the wingers. Remember, Andrew Conway, I think, has got a bit of a knee injury, so Mack Hansen is kind of the beneficiary there, but that's a pretty exciting looking wing combo, I must say. And then Hugo, Keenan, steady as she goes. At the back will be devouring whatever high balls Scotland decide to throw his way, because we've just seen that from him all Six Nations, haven't we? He's Mr. Consistent. Herring, Kilcoyne, Bealham, same front row replacements. Treadwell is in the 23, so good for him to get a chance to, to get some minutes under his belt. O'Mahony, like I mentioned, Murray, Carbery and Henshaw. So as I said, pretty steady as she goes. For the Irish guys, a little bit of tinkering with the forwards, a change in the backs, largely due to injury, but otherwise, yeah, pretty stable. Gibson-Park's got like 3 try assists this year. He's been doing really well, so expect to see more from him, I would imagine. And interestingly, Garry Ringrose has had more carries than anybody else in that Irish team. So he's been just kind of quietly going under the radar. For Scotland, they've also kind of tinkered a wee bit. They've got Scuban, Turner and Ferguson as their front row. That's pretty much the same as last week, I think. Although if I looked at Ferguson's stats, he's still high on penalties conceded. I mean, Tadhg Furlong jumped up on scrum penalties conceded, probably based on just that one game last week. But yeah, it's an area where Ferguson needs to watch things, because not all his scrum penalties. Sometimes it's around the park. Johnny Gray's back, which is good news, into the second row, so he jumps in alongside Gilchrist, which means Sam Skinner has to make way, but he is still on the bench. Tadhg, Watson and Ferguson, that's Matt, are the same back row as last week. Not a lot got talked about Matt Ferguson last week because he didn't carry the ball a heck of a lot, but defensively, I know it's only against Italy, but the guy was a powerhouse, won some turnovers, got through some tackles, so Italy's attack was as sharp as it's ever looked last week, and yeah, it was a good performance from him, which has not been talked about a heck of a lot. Price and Kinghorn are the 19 combo. Kinghorn, you might say. Yeah, well, Kinghorn, they're talking up his game against Edinburgh, and he did play really well against Edinburgh. He played for Edinburgh. Against Conor the other day, where he played at 10. Remember, he didn't travel to Italy, Blair Kinghorn. It was Adam Hastings on the bench for that one, and Russell got a start. Well, it's Russell who gets a start. Russell's on the bench for this one, and Kinghorn who gets a start. All over the place, folks. Yeah, but is that selection all over the place or what? I mean, Adam Hastings, wasn't it only a year or two ago when Finn Russell and Kinghorn, Townsend had a falling out, and then Adam Hastings stepped up and played pretty well? And he's been playing pretty well at Gloucester. He doesn't get a start, and they're playing Kinghorn at 10. I mean, I wish Kinghorn all the best, and certainly going into a World Cup, to have a guy who can fill multiple positions like Blair Kinghorn can in the back three and at 10 in a pinch is good news. But man, chucking him in the deep end against Johnny Sexton in a rampant Ireland team in Dublin, man, that's a real test. Maybe this is a true test, as if you need to take a guy like Hastings to a World Cup, because if Kinghorn puts in a good performance, maybe he's legit just the other 10. And Russell's been a bit hot and cold this Six Nations, so power to him. I hope he has a good game. That's a big old test. Like, he played against Tonga, which is a different kettle of fish. Johnson and Harris the same midfield. Stain and Graham the same wingers, and Hogg still there captaining at fullback. Other changes: Fraser Brown is back in. We haven't seen him in a Scotland jersey for quite some time, so congratulations to him. He's had a long injury layoff. Dell and Nell are the prop replacements. Sam Skinner, like I mentioned. Josh Bayliss is in. Ben White is in. So there's no Velicott this week. Russell, like I mentioned, and then Mark Bennett is in as well. So a lot of changes on the bench and a bit of tinkering with that front. The starting lineup, but not a heck of a lot. But it's the Kinghorn one, which is a huge test, and we'll kind of see what he's made of. Darcy Graham's been your main attack weapon, hasn't he? I mean, I know it was all about Duhan last year, and I said the same last week, but yeah, Darcy Graham has been really, really cracking the Six Nations, and it's good to see Chris Harris get a couple of tries last week to show us that he's more than just the defensive guy that we know him for. Interestingly, stats-wise, there's a distinct pattern with Ireland that teams seem to just tire against Ireland, and that probably speaks to the relentless way they go through all those phases. Like, every other team seems to have a kind of pretty even pattern of when they score points, and there's not like a overall pattern that shows that they seem to score more points kind of later on. But Ireland has 56 first half points and 86 second half points. Like, most teams don't have such a huge split that they just pile on the points in the second half. Like, last week against England was a good example. I know England were a man down, but England, by the end of it, just couldn't stop those two kind of late tries from coming in. Like, as I said, most teams don't have such a distinct split between first and second half points, but Ireland, in the second half, just pack on more points. Seems to be a theme across the tournament. Obviously, it's not every game, but yeah, that just seems to be a thing. 217 passes a game. Ireland's getting through a lot of work. Other teams like Wales, 170, Scotland, 160. Like, 217 is miles in front of everybody else. Their offloads is second only to France. I mean, Ireland's got the most turnovers conceded per game, but they've just got so much more ball and so many more passes that kind of makes sense. If you've got more ball and you're passing it more, you're gonna lose it more. That's just the kind of law averages. Yeah, for Scotland, it's been an interesting campaign. Like, they got the most defenders beaten, like 27 defenders beaten the game. You can thank Darcy Graham, Hogg, and Price for a lot of those. But the average across the other teams is 21, so 27 is pretty solid. But Scotland is conceding the most penalties as well. It's not a massive difference. They're conceding like 11.5 penalties a game. Like, the average is like 9, I think. Well, 9 is one of the better numbers, so it's not a huge difference, but it's just, yeah, not an area they'll want to be, the number one team for. Interestingly, Scotland's goal kicking percentage is really high. That's not an area you would think, like when Finn Russell especially is not a renowned goal kicker, but he's been doing all right actually. And it's interesting that there's only one 20-minute block. If you're breaking the game down into quarters, there's only one time that Scotland hasn't managed to score points in a quarter, and that was against Italy last week when they kind of went off the boil in the final 20 minutes. So otherwise, Scotland's pretty consistent with scoring their points all throughout every game, whereas Ireland, as I mentioned, just love to pack them on in the second half. So yeah, some interesting numbers. Recent history between the sides, it's all Ireland. 5-0 over the last 5 games. Average score across those games is 25-14. So pretty comfortable. But like I mentioned, last year's one, 27-24. I think it was a late Sexton penalty that won that one, right? Yeah, it can be close. But in recent times, it's been all Ireland. 2017 is the last Scottish win. So it's a wee while between drinks. And 2010 is the last Scottish win in Ireland. So that's a long, long time ago. So yeah, the Scots have got it all to do in this one. It is at the Aviva. It's on at 4:45 local time. Wayne Barnes is the referee. Ireland are favourites. They are 17-point favourites with both the bookies and the algorithm. So yeah, you guys will have to let me know if you reckon Scotland can hand France a title, or is it going to be more of the same from what we've seen in Scotland and Ireland in recent times. If you want to watch it, it's on ITV and on Virgin Media 1 in the UK and Ireland respectively. If you're outside of those territories, you can use a VPN to jump on and watch for free. Instructions down in the description along with a wee link there. If you want British and Irish Lions gear, it's still on sale. Loads of you guys have bought some. So yeah, man, grab some gear while it's cheap. That's kind of my thing as well. Link down in the description for that as well. Otherwise, you guys take care, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.